Hello and welcome. This video is for the NOFAN CR-80EH, a completely fanless cooler for processors with TDP less than 80 watts. NOFAN are quite keen to stress that. This video is a general fitting guide and discussion for that cooler. The processor that we'll be cooling today is an i3 7100 at 3.9 gigahertz. That has a TDP of 51 watts, so well below 80 watts, so it shouldn't have any problems. The stock cooler that came with that is this one here, and as you can see it's all aluminium, so and quite narrow, so that is actually going to be pretty noisy, and it was pretty noisy. The processor is just over a year old, although they were released 2017, so I suppose it's more like 2 years. Quite a noisy fan, quite clunky, quite thin, no copper in it, so yes, noisy, don't like that. So this NOFAN one is completely fanless, so it's totally silent, 0 decibels, but obviously there might be consequences to that. So first of all, let's look at what we're going to do first, because that's the first thing we're going to do. I'll move that out of the way and we'll look at the bits that come with it. Here's a top tip when you're fitting any aftermarket cooler, because at first sight you open the box and you get the bag or the other assorted boxes and it's full of millions of little bits and you think, oh no, what am I going to do? First thing to do is realise that not all the parts are going to be used, because the fan will support Intel and AMD. Because this is an Intel, we don't need the AMD bits. So the first thing we're going to do is work out which are the AMD bits. And if we look at the manual, ta-da, that is the AMD bit. So we can immediately take those two plates and put them back in there. Now these other bits are used by both AMD and Intel installations, so I have only removed 2 bits. On other coolers you might find that there's a whole load of other stuff that you can just get rid of depending on which CPU you're fitting. So if we look at the bottom of it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screw holes. There's a bit of plastic shielding on there, which I'm going to keep on for the time being. So you look at the manual. Now this depends on which one you get, because some manuals are a nightmare. This one is actually quite good. So first of all it says, are you using Intel or are you using AMD? If you're using AMD, are you using an AM4 socket? If you're using Intel, it goes like that. If you're using AM4, it goes like that. And if you're using any other AMD socket, it goes like that. But obviously we're not going to be using those clips. Those clips are used for both the AM4 and the Intel, but the orientation is different. So we've got to screw those onto the back of there so that it looks like that. That's not going to be that difficult, I don't think. And then it talks you through how you put it through. So you've got 2 screws that go through, and on the underside there's some other screws. So we have these bits here, 4 of those bits, 4 of the longer screws, 8 of the little tiny screws, a couple of little plastic bits, and then the actual plates themselves. So those are the bits we're going to use. So that fits on there according to that. Looks like you have to screw it in, because they have got little ridges on there like that. See? So you put the screw on there, get the screw through there, and then you mount it on, and that's actually quite stiff. So if I screw that through there, which might be easier said than done with my fingers, but we'll see how we get on. I'm spinning it through. I can actually push it now. It's made a bit of the plastic away. So that's going to fit like that. And that will go on there and look at the picture, you want that picture there, so we hold it like that, so that's going to go on like that. Like that. That's better. So, I mean, I've never looked at this cooler before, but I'm not going to mount it wrongly, and I am going to do one of the most important things when you are building things like this, is just take your time. And if you're doing it competitively, which you're not, but unless you're doing it competitively, there's no reason to rush. And part of the reason people buy these things and buy the parts is there's just the fun of building things, because that is kind of good fun. And let's not be under no illusions here, you're not really building, are you? You're assembling, and assembling is traditionally not a particularly skilled job. I mean, it's skilled in the sense that if you do it often enough, you get quite good at it through repetition, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily skilled, would you? I mean, if you've got any opinions on that, stick them in the comments. But we're assembling things, and hopefully the people that design the things that we're assembling will have the intelligence to realize that you sell more products if you make it relatively simple to do it. But obviously you can't compromise on what the object is actually going to do. So there are limits to how easy you can make it. I mean, you can't put Velcro on there and just go, it's not going to work, is it? So there has to be a compromise between function and ease of assembly, but you know, the instruction manuals are generally very clear, and you can take your time over it. So we're going to push those through like that, and then we're going to attach them so they look like that photo there. So there's two screws there that are closer, those two are farther away, and we want the two closest ones. So we want that like that, and then we'll screw another one on there, and then we'll do the same on the opposite side. I'll just repeat that a little bit closer so you can see it. So we're going to do, you've got two screws there that are close together. We want one like that, one like that, one like that, and then one like that for Intel, so that it looks like that. Obviously if you're doing AMD, then you do that one there, but it's the same parts, just different orientations, and it's not going to fit if it's not on right, so we should be okay. So I'll just get that done, because you don't really want to watch me screwing all these little tiny screws in. So we'll get the tiny screws all fitted in, and then I'll come back and we'll get the thing fitted on. Okay, so almost got all the things on. Here's a quick tip. You get the little bracket thing, get it in the right position, which is going to be something like that. So you get the upside down, right way up thing going on. Push the little thing through the hole. There's a little tiny tab to line it up. And get your screw and just push the screw through so it's in all the way, like that. And then get yourself a little screw on there, and screw one of them in. Like that, not too tightly. We've actually got two screws left over, so they've given two spare screws. And then put the other one in, and now we can tighten it up a little bit. And that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4 on there, two screws left over, they can go back in the bag. So the next step is to actually fit it onto the CPU, which we'll do now. So what isn't mentioned so far is that everything I've done so far is actually in the manual. So pushing the little plastic thing in before you put the screw through for the mounting brackets is mentioned in the manual. It's not massively clear. They could make it clearer. I don't think anyone involved in education particularly makes these manuals, but nonetheless. So hopefully that's helped you put those on much quicker, and that's what it looks like when they're on. They don't turn because they obviously need to be held in by those bits of plastic. There's also a NOFAN printed or stamped on the inside bit. So if you're mounting the case, if you're mounting the motherboard vertically in the case with the side panel, you're going to want it around that way, upside down for this video, so that when it goes on, the NOFAN bit is visible, and you can see that fits the socket holes quite nicely. But one thing we have to do is take off the little plastic shield. Well, it's not really a shield, is it? The little plastic film on the bottom of the heatsink. Do not want that to be on there when the processor's on, because that will melt. And that is beautifully shiny. Look, you can see around the room. Oh, look, it's B. So there's all these sort of things here that we have to think about. And we're going to put a bit of thermal paste on. It comes with thermal paste. You can obviously use your own if you've got some lying about. I'm just going to use what came with it. The eternal question is, how much do you put on? Well, normally it's about a grain of rice, because you're not providing an interface between the top of the processor, the lid of the processor. What you're actually doing is just filling in the tiny little holes in the surface of the lid. So you're not making like jam and jam sandwich, which obviously you can't taste unless there's enough jam on. So there's not actually very much paste going on there. It seems like there's a lot, but it's like a little nail polish. So that's kind of nice. So I've just coated that very lightly with the paste. It's about a grain of rice full. And now I'm going to put that on like that. Now there's 4 of these little screws here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're going to be put on, but they're put on from underneath. And the best way to do that, I'm going to try and do this in one take without doing anything, is if I just raise it up slightly. I don't think you'll be able to see what I'm doing now, that's any problem. Let's just whittle the camera up like that. Can you see now? I think you can. There's the base of the motherboard. Now what you notice with this particular motherboard mount is there's a cut off at the bottom, but the screws aren't, all the screw holes aren't visible. So although this looks nice, here's another problem you get. If you're trying to fit it inside your case, you have to have access to the back, which you can't on this particular one. So I'm going to unscrew this. It's only held on by about 3 screws. So I'm going to unscrew this motherboard and get it ready to put the back pins on, the back screws on, and then we'll start the next bit of the video. And here we are. So I've taken it off the sort of stand it was on, and hopefully you can see now it's 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So I'm just going to screw one on very lightly, and we'll get them all on. Before we start worrying about tightening it up. So if you've got access to the back of your motherboard inside the case, then you're going to be okay, because it should go through quite nicely. So that's them on. So I'm just going to start tightening them up, and we'll see what happens. Doing sort of alternate ones. I don't want to squeeze things too much. So I'm doing it finger tight at the moment. There isn't really any feedback about how tight it needs to go. So we need to look at the motherboard, and that's not bending. So I'm going to turn it over and we'll have a look. Get these cables out of the way. That's for the drives that are on this particular machine. I'm just going to see if I can wiggle it, and I can't move that. The pins aren't bent. The little mounting plates there and there aren't bent. So I guess we're okay. I've got a funny feeling that if you look at the back, there's no holes in these. So when you screw it in, the screws go into the screw and then they stop. So maybe you tighten it up until it stops, he said nervously. So that's, I'm only doing it finger tight. It doesn't come with any of the spanner, it doesn't come with any tools. So I'm just doing this finger tight to see if it stops, because I think it will do. Remember, we don't want to over tighten it, but obviously we don't want to under tighten it. I think finger tight's going to be fine. I wonder if the manual says anything about this. Let's have a look. Tighten hand nut from back of motherboard. And that's it. So it doesn't give you any indication about how much you should tighten it, just that you should. So that's what I'm doing. Now those are hand tight. And that's not going anywhere. And that brings us very nicely to the next part of the video, now that's on, as to whether there are some issues with what can fit. Now this motherboard has got 4 RAM slots. I'm just going to drop the camera down a bit, so don't be surprised if it's a bit funny like that, because what I want to do is have a look at this area here. So here's the motherboard with it on, and that's the, let's make it up. I should have really thought of this before I did it, but all the videos I'm doing were in one take. I don't edit them because, well, I can't be arsed mainly, but it's cheating a little bit, isn't it? So you can see, now this is Patriot Viper Elite RAM, so it's got quite a big heat spreader on it, and you can see that even without that, the first slot next to the motherboard isn't usable, so you're limited to 2 sticks of RAM. Apart from that, there's loads of room. So if I wiggle it, hopefully you can see that there's loads of room between the cooler and the first stick of RAM, so it's not touching at all. There's a good 2 or 3 millimeters in between where the bars of the cooler are and the sticks of RAM. But the first socket itself is completely obscured, so you wouldn't be able to fit anything in there. You might, because you can get really low profile ones that are a couple of centimeters, can't you? So that might fit, but anything else, you're limited to 2 sticks, which if all you need is 2 sticks isn't a problem. Those are 2 4s, so there's 8 in total, so this machine's got enough for what it does, but you can see that it obscures. So in terms of contact with anything else, this motherboard's got a bit of a plasticky thing on there with the lights on it and stuff, and that's nowhere near it. Now with the previous models, that's basically it fitted. I'm just going to see if I can tighten these up a little bit more. That one seems to be quite loose, so I'll do that one. With the previous models, they had a higher TDP rating, 95 and 100, depending on which CR1 you got. One was sort of aluminium and one was copper, and one was sort of, they were very nice. I did a previous unboxing video a couple of years ago about one, and they are pretty amazing coolers architecturally. I think what they realised though is that if you want to have a silent PC, then you're not necessarily going to have an i7, and people with i7s and processors like that are going to use some other kind of cooler, and they don't really care about whether it's silent or not, because they're going to shove a radiator on it or something, aren't they? A water loop. So they realized that the fans they were producing were over-engineered for the kind of processors that people actually wanted to silently cool. Remember, this is an i3 7100, and it should, that's 51 TDP, the cooler's rated at 80, so it should easily cool that. The problem you've got with the high level processors is that you need a much more substantial arrangement for it to cool passively, so that the CR195 and the CR100 were absolutely huge, as you can see from the previous video I made. That creates all sorts of problems with it obstructing PCI Express slots. It really was a massive problem for RAM, because the RAM, most of the RAM slots were in fact obscured, so you couldn't have taller RAM in it. You had to go for a very low profile, and that limits your RAM choices. Also, any motherboards that have got funky stuff on the voltage regulators and the DRMs, that was going to get in the way, especially if you've got this sort of plasticky stuff, plastic armor and things. So they realized that they weren't, people that were going to cool their CPUs passively weren't going to need anything that big. So they made this, and this is the only one they make now. They don't make any other ones, and that's fine, because it will passively cool processors with a TDP of less than 80. So yeah, but it's not as, it doesn't look anywhere near as impressive as the previous one does. Another thing they stipulate, which they didn't stipulate before, was that you need to have a case with a hole in the roof, which is fine really, because a lot of cases now have spaces for radiators in their roofs. But they never did that on the previous one. They just said you just need to, doesn't matter, just plug it all in and you're fine. So they've obviously rethought about their product line and rethought about the kind of things that they're manufacturing, and stopped making the big ones because they were overpriced for what people wanted, because they were more of an engineering feat. They were more complicated to manufacture, use more materials, so they cost a lot more than this one, which actually is what people want to buy to cool the processors that they want to air cool, if you see what I mean. But anyway, we'll get this in the case, and we'll have another look. Right, so we're all in the case, we're all fitted, and it's running Prime 95 on its burn-in, and according to CPU ID hardware monitor, it's at 84 degrees, maximum 85 degrees. It confuses the temperature monitor, because that thinks it's at 27, which it isn't. The North Bridge is at 44 and I'm 31, so the temperature monitor thing is working, temperature probe is working fine. It just doesn't like the copper thing. To touch it, I might regret this. I can hold my finger on it and it's warm. Still getting uncomfortable now, but I'm not burnt. And that there, if I touch that, that is, the top of it is warmer than the bottom of it, which suggests that there's a sort of fluid in there that drops to the bottom and then rises and drops and rises, but I might be making that up. This case is a Corsair 550D Obsidian, but it's the old style one, and it's got a top plate, which I have now removed, and now the air can escape more freely. I'll just release the camera and we'll go and have a look. So there's the top panel, and there's the heatsink, and there's the top panel again. If I remove this mesh, you get a much better view of what's going on. Mainly of the table there by the look of it. I can't really see what I'm doing. So there it is. I can feel the heat rising off it here. So obviously that back top plate, well, that top plate's going to stay off. The case has also got one on the sides that'll come off as well, so we get a bit of convection from there. The case comes with 3 fans, 2 at the front and 1 at the back. They're disconnected. Not going to bother with those. The power supply is a Seasonic Platinum fanless. I can't remember the exact model. I think there's an unboxing of it, and that's that there. So that's completely fanless. That's not generating any heat. We've peaked at 88 according to hardware monitor. There it is doing its thing, and that's what it says there. Now that's obviously under 100% load. It's pretty cool, isn't it, if you think about it? It's only red because of some lights, and because it's copper. It's not red because it's glowing, and you can see the decorative and functional heat pipe from the DRM heatsink on the motherboard. So it looks like it's red up, but it isn't. So there, like that. And you can see it says no fan, or you might not be able to depending on the angle. That's now at 88 degrees, so that's pretty warm. So I'm going to stop Prime 95 and we'll see how quickly the temperature drops. So it's already down to 57, 56, 55, 54. It's quite a hot day anyway, so the temperature's still dropping. Now the load's off it. Obviously there's no fans in there to help blow any air about, so it should drop to ambient, but it will take a while. Let's just see how hot the hard drives are. Temperature probe says the hard drives are 34. That's still 42, and that's confused it. I'm guessing, well, I don't know why. It's infrared. I guess it's not, because it's too shiny. That is 29. There's no real surprises on the motherboard. If I sweep it over, the highest bit is what you'd expect. What's the SSD? Well, M.2 doing? That's 38 degrees. So yeah, no real surprises. It's dropped to 47 now, but I'll leave it for a bit. Pop that back on there. I'll leave it for a bit to see what it stabilizes at, but we'll get the side panel on now, and that's it here. Just wiggle these things slightly. It's got quite a nice side panel. It's also got foam in it as well as a noise dampener, but there shouldn't be any noise at all once this gets itself sorted out. So we go in. That's quite pleasing. It's got a little button at the side. If I press that, that reveals the side panel that comes off as well, which hopefully you can see, and you can. Let's peel off the, it's a little bit dusty actually, to be fair. So here's a tip as well. While you're cleaning your computer, use one of these. I just give it a brush. Ideally with a vacuum cleaner nearby, not touching it, but just like that. Lovely. Right, so there's that. So we'll see what that does. I'll leave it to idle for a bit. It's dropped to 41 degrees, so it's idling at 41, and you can feel there's a bit of heat. You can feel the heat coming out the top. I don't know if you can feel a draft or not. I'm not imagining it. Maybe because the convection will pull air in. The case hasn't got much at the front. There's these bits at the side which you can't move up on my finger, right on the right of the screen. Those are vents there, but the main fans are actually hidden behind a plate anyway, with another one of these dust filter meshes on. So anyway, I'll leave it to idle for a bit and we'll see how we get on, see what the temperatures are like. Okay, we're now back. That was quick, wasn't it? So it's been a couple of hours now. I've put the dust filter mesh on, because it was quite nice. And same on the top as well, but you can't see that. I'll lift the camera up so you can there in a minute. And I'll just detach the camera and we'll go over here, and it is idling at 37 degrees. And the maximum it recorded while it was under test was 88. And that's on 100% load, and there's nothing, apart from maybe rendering or filming coding or anything, that kind of activity, nothing is ever going to have the processor running at 100% apart from that kind of thing, and of course Prime 95, which just destroys the processor really with jobs to do. So even at full 100% load, it peaked out at 88 degrees, which is below 100. It's pretty hot, pretty toasty. With a heatsink that had a cooler on, you could probably get that, you probably wouldn't get above 70. So it gets pretty toasty, but it is passively cooling it. And as long as you've got the airflow, because you've got the side bit and the top bit, you should be all right. So as I say, it's idling there at 37, 36. I think it was 32 at one stage. It depends also on the ambient temperature of the room, obviously, because it's quite a hot, sunny day today. So I think it's cooling quite well. And you can see the maximum load there was 100%. So I'm going to just clamp the camera down again, and we'll pop the side panel off. It's very easy to do with this case. I love Corsair cases. They've got really nice mechanisms on them. Or at least they used to. I haven't bought one for a while. So, yeah. Have a closer look at it. There it is. So you can see the RAM is far enough away for it not to be a problem, provided you're using the outer two slots, which of course I am on this. This machine's got 4 hard drives in it anyway, so they'll generate a bit of heat. Mechanical, and you've got the M.2 for the operating system. Apart from that, there's nothing else in there. There's no mechanical things apart from the hard drives. Everything else is completely passive. So the power supply is passive and the heatsink's passive as well, obviously. So yeah, if you've got any questions or any comments, or you need any clarification about what I've done and what I've said, then obviously put some comments below. If you think it's been interesting and helpful, then like and subscribe, preferably both, obviously. And if I think of anything in the meantime, I'll do a follow-on. But generally speaking, as a general tip, when you're buying a cooler that isn't a stock cooler, don't be afraid to fit it. They do come with instructions. It is relatively simple to follow the instructions, and it's not a race. When I trained tech support people for Evesham Technology, as was Evesham Micros, a long time ago, the people that worked in their manufacturing facilities, because one of my students' mums used to do it, they're expected to produce about 6 computers an hour, and that's an assembly line. That's a factory assembly line. So it's not. This is a hobbyist. If you're building for a hobby purposes, then you can take as long as you want, and it's probably a good idea to do that just because it's fun more than anything else, and it reduces the risk of breaking stuff. If you want tutorial videos about how to build things, then I can do that. That's not a problem. I've got a few rules that I follow myself when I'm doing things. But when it came to this cooler, it was relatively simple to fit. The little tip where you put the plastic thing in first is actually in the manual, which I didn't bother reading. I don't find them very clear. Maybe they should get me to do them for them, I don't know. But it fits quite nicely. I'm a little bit, I mean, the back of it, remember, this has suddenly come to mind, so sorry if I'm rambling a bit. The back of it, the 4 screws at the back, what I've just suddenly realised is that they're plastic. You've got the metal inside for the actual bolt bit of it, but then the outer bits are plastic. Now, why would they make them plastic when they could actually make them metal like you get on other coolers? I think they've made them plastic so that you can't over tighten it, because if you get a spanner on that and start winding away, when it becomes tight, the plastic will start to wear and break, and you won't get very good purchase, which is a great word. You won't get very good purchase with your spanner. So I think they've made them plastic for you know, maybe, well, not economics, because if they made them metal, they just, yeah, they've made them plastic and metal, so there's some assembly required for those pieces. So I think they've deliberately made them plastic so that you can't over tighten it. Because if you do put too much force on there and start to bend the retention things, the little brackets that we've screwed on, then the plastic will wear and the spanner will slip. So I think that's why they've done it. So I've done it finger tight, and it's cooling, never got above 90, and it's cooling fine. I think I might just tighten it up a little bit more just to be sure, because I'm a little bit cautious about that. But you shouldn't worry about fitting these things. If they were worried, they wouldn't sell them. And whilst there is a balance between manufacturing and what the job actually of the device, or the product you're fitting is, there's a compromise between design, function, and practicality. Those things are obviously linked together. Mainly, the first and foremost, it's function, isn't it? So this has got to cool passively. Practicality, you've got to. It's an aftermarket cooler, so you've got to be able to fit it. And people look up, but there are certain things you have to do, and some are easier than others. But don't worry, take your time. Yeah. So if you watch this video for to see the cooler, sorry it rambled on a bit. If you watched it because it's going to give you a bit of confidence to do this sort of thing yourself, then that's also good. As mentioned, I'll mention it again, but this time I'll sign off. Any questions, any comments, stick them in the comments, and thanks for watching.